Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to Bluff City. This is episode number 14, and in today's episode, we're going to continue to be working on the medical district. It's really a hospital complex that's east of the medical district. I'm also going to be working on the Courtyard Marriott, which is an asset that I'm working on now. I'm about 80% finished with it, so it may or may not be on the workshop by the time you're watching this video. I'm also going to be working on this O'Reilly Auto Parts, which is an asset that I just finished, and I was able to complete this asset in less than a day. And I think I really enjoyed that a lot, being able to start and finish an asset within a couple of hours versus these big, large projects that I've been doing over the past couple of weeks, which go on and on forever. You'll see me detail the O'Reilly Auto Parts, the very last thing in this episode, which really only took about, I'd probably say less than about 20 minutes to complete. Right now I'm working on this apartment complex, which is right next to the hospital. I'm using the modern lofts or modern apartments by Los Gecko, and once I saw these on the workshop, I just knew that they were going to be perfect for the apartment or the type of apartments that I wanted right next to the hospital. For the hospital itself, I'm actually not using any hospitals. I'm thinking about using some of the hospital garages or ambulance garages that you can just plop and ambulances appear, or it functions as a hospital. But in one of the previous episodes where I was working on the medical district, I used a ton of hospitals, so I actually disabled or turned off most of the hospitals just because it takes a lot of funding. Right now you see it, I'm losing about a negative $5,000. Not that I'm too concerned about money or the budget. I'm using a lot of parking garages. Here I'm using a parking garage that I originally did downtown. It's a parking garage and it's surrounded by some office buildings that I did. And I really like the look of the garage. I think it really fits in well with a lot of the area versus just placing the standard garage. In this episode, I also worked on a hospital. Not a hospital, but a high school. Obviously, I worked on a hospital. But I also worked on this high school. And I couldn't find the high school that I originally wanted, which was the classic high school. So I just used a stand-in temporary building until I could restart the game and subscribe to the asset again. I'm looking for just various apartments and buildings that will blend into the area. For the hospital itself, the main building is an office building from Boldly Building, which is also the same building that I used for the Criminal Justice Center downtown. I wish Boldly Building would make more of these buildings. A lot of his office buildings, he had, different styles and different sizes. For this particular one, he only had about 2 sizes or 2 variations of it, and I really like the look and the texture of it. And so I just wish that we had more plain, generic, boring brick buildings in a similar style. In the time lapse, you can see me intermittently work on the high school, and I decided to use these football fields that I created a long while ago. Someone pointed out to me on Twitter that the problem with these is that they are decals, so they disappear very quickly when you zoom out. So I'm definitely thinking about eventually turning them into buildings or props so that with adaptive prop visibility, they won't disappear as quickly, because I really like the texture on all of the football fields, but I haven't really used them a whole lot. So hopefully it wouldn't be too much work to use the same texture just to create a different asset. Sometimes you just never know how an asset is going to function in game or how long it's going to take to create a certain asset. And usually it's the simplest assets that you think aren't going to take a whole lot of time, but they end up taking a lot more time than necessary. You see, I'm playing around with the Oasis Hotel, and I thought about cutting this footage out, but I decided to leave it in. I just wanted to see how the Oasis looked in comparison to some of the buildings in Bluff City, like in a normal city. I think it's pretty well sized because it's not towering over the other buildings, but just in terms of size or area, it takes up a huge amount of space, which it should, because in real life, it takes up blocks and blocks of the Las Vegas Strip. And so I thought that was just kind of fun seeing how the look and style of the building fits in with Bluff City. And overall, I'm really happy with the way the Oasis Hotel looks. I'm really happy with the textures. I've been really taking my time just finishing it and putting the finishing touches on it. It's probably about 95% finished, and I've just been stalling. But I do plan on working on that later on today and going ahead and getting that uploaded to the workshop, because I want to start on my next project for Paradise Valley. And I have to stop myself from working on anything new in regards to the next project before I'm able to get the Oasis 100% finished. So enough about Paradise Valley and back to Bluff City and what I'm doing right here as far as the hospital is concerned. I think this is the Skyline Mall building, and I'm using some of my brick walls to surround it and to just give it a different look and texture on the first floor. And I think that fits in really well with the look that I'm going for this hospital. I'm also using some of the City High School building assets along with some dorm buildings that I made just to give the hospital complex a few different styles, but still keeping within the overall red brick feel of the complex. And of course, I'm using a lot of different parking lots just to complete the area. I think half of the city will probably be parking lots. I try to go into a little detail as far as the complex, but again, I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time and detail with it. I've kind of noticed my computer slowing down with Bluff City, which is kind of surprising to me because I don't use a whole lot of detail or a whole lot of props. Well, at least not in comparison to a lot of other YouTubers. And so I'm really kind of surprised that it's already starting to slow down when I really don't have a whole lot of the map worked on or complete. So in addition to just being lazy with detailing, I'm also cognizant of the effect and the slowdown as far as the frame rate and everything with my computer. And also, I'm just not very good with managing assets. I'm up to about 3,000 assets, and a lot of them I don't even use. They're probably really old assets that for some reason has just kind of slipped by and that I hadn't gotten around to unsubscribing to. Like when you manage a huge collection of assets, that in itself is just another aspect of the game that takes a long time when you're dealing with assets and collections. Sometimes you have to spend the entire day just going through assets and deleting and adding to collections. For this particular project, I knew that I didn't want to do any custom buildings. I didn't want to make any hospital buildings. I knew I wanted to use these office buildings by boldly building as the main components of the hospital. But I did want something to kind of set it apart. So I did work on, well, not really work on because it didn't take long. But I made these hospital props, basically a Methodist hospital sign, as well as a cross. And I also looked on the workshop. I couldn't find any props to use as helipads. All I came across on the workshop was just mainly decals for helipads, which really wouldn't work as far as placing them on top of buildings. And so I created a helipad prop that you can elevate and place on top of the buildings. And you can see right there, I placed some on top of these residential buildings, as well as these filler buildings that I'm using to just kind of fill in the area. And so I definitely think it gives it more of a hospital type feel. I'm not sure how realistic that is to have just several different helipads in the same complex. Right here, again, I've used this technique several times. I'm dragging pedestrian paths through the buildings to create a walkway system around the hospital complex. So I just like the idea that people will walk through buildings to get through another building or walk across the skywalk there. And I think it helps just aesthetically because people aren't just parking or all walking on the sidewalks around the perimeter of the area. They're actually walking through the areas and through the buildings and everything. Off camera, I did work on a residential area just right outside of the hospital complex. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get that on cinematics or not. I'm not sure if I'm even going to include any cinematics in this episode. I feel like I need to do more of is just more residential areas. I haven't worked on hardly any in this series so far. For some reason, residential neighborhoods just doesn't excite me a whole lot. If you follow me on the Steam Workshop, then obviously you know that I like commercial buildings and commercial areas. So I'm much more likely to work on commercial areas and put more detail into them than I will any residential neighborhoods. For the rest of the area, I'm going to just be filling in everything with parking lots and curb props, along with some trees. I would consider the hospital complex pretty much finished. I'll probably go back and add just a few more minor details. I know with the but the high school that I'm working on, I still got a lot of things to do with that. But that's going to wrap things up as far as the hospital complex is concerned. And I'll be back in just a few minutes to talk about the Courtyard Marriott Hotel. Hey, what's up y'all? I'm back. And as you can see here, I'm working on the Courtyard Marriott, which is honestly, this is one of my favorite assets that I've worked on or I've done in quite some time. I've always wanted to make hotels like this in this style, this kind of modern, suburban, boring style. But I recently stayed in one of these in Houston, and so I kind of had some extra time to start working on it. And I'm just overall really happy at the way it turned out. I thought about adding a lot more detail to it, and that was originally the plan. But once I uploaded it into the game and started working on the detail around the building and just seeing how good it looked already in game, and I don't think I've done a normal map on it yet. So I was really happy with the way it looked in game. A lot of the other things that I kind of felt like or thought I would have to do to it got scrapped. The model is pretty much 100% finished. I've got to do some things as far as the illumination map and making the windows look different. Right now, all of the windows are the same, and I haven't added any variation to them. But that's going to be one of the last things that I do, which really shouldn't take that long. So this should definitely be on the workshop within the next week or so. As far as this location in Bluff City, I really hadn't planned on including this hotel with this hospital. But in real life, there's actually, I think, a Hampton Inn or a Holiday Inn Express across the street from the hospital. And so it just really worked out well to include this hospital or this hotel across the street from the hospital. And here you see I'm just placing some curbs and detailing the parking lots, which honestly, the parking lots get really repetitive. And so I just cut a lot of that out. Working on the parking lot was one of the main things that I did for this build. So I did decide to leave a little bit of it in. And I'm using these curb prop extensions that I uploaded. And I try to use a variation of different curbs. There are some white curbs on the workshop that I like to use, and at first I didn't really use them a whole lot just because it didn't come in different sizes. But with the prop line tool and the line extension tool, they're really easier to use now, and so I really like them. I also use some of Oasis curbs. Here you see the back of the Courtyard, which I really liked. I originally wanted something more big and grand and to include a lot of detail in terms of the actual asset itself. But when I really kind of thought about things, I realized some of, actually most of the stuff that I wanted to include in this back area were already existing props that can be placed by the user. But in the end, I'm really happy with how the back area of it turned out. I think I have a little more work to do on it, but overall, I really like the patio area. Here I'm using some patio furniture that I uploaded to the workshop a couple of weeks ago, along with just some different tables and umbrellas. I'm also placing a couple of grills. I don't know how realistic that is to have a grill for residents at a hotel, but it is what it is. Right there you see me placing some different colored umbrellas, which I haven't gotten around to uploading to the workshop. I don't know why. It just takes a long time to deal with props and color variations, since for some reason you can't actually see the color variations of props in the asset editor. And so you really just have to guess on the color and then be surprised when you use them in game. Right here I'm using a glass fence that I created. Earlier in another episode I used the glass fence that's not transparent I think this kind of works well because usually with some of the glass assets, the transparency, you can't really see them due to the angle of the sun and the shadows and everything. But I like the way that they work in the back of this area. For the rest of the time lapse, I'm just placing some trees around the entire area. And I'm also going to be working on this O'Reilly Auto Parts that is right adjacent to the Courtyard Marriott. So that's going to wrap things up for me for right now. I hope y'all enjoyed the rest of the time lapse. But in the meantime, go ahead and hit the like button on this video if you enjoy my assets and you enjoy some of the builds that I do here on Bluff City. Also, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you're notified when I upload. You're going to get previews to all my newest and upcoming assets that I upload to the workshop. Also, a lot of insight into what goes into creating the assets and backstories on some of my assets. And when y'all leave comments here on YouTube, I take those into more of a consideration than I would comments from the Steam workshop. So if you have any feedback for me or any suggestions, go ahead and leave a comment. Again, I appreciate all y'all for the support, and I will see all of y'all in the next episode.